December 18, 1978. At 6:17 a.m. in a small one-bedroom apartment in Ozone Park, Queens, Parnell Stax Edwards was seated at his kitchen table playing cards with his girlfriend when the door suddenly swung open. There was no knock, no forewarning. Tommy DeSimone entered carrying a .38 caliber revolver, with Angelo Seep right behind him. Stax looked up instantly, aware of why they had come. DeSimone raised the weapon and fired 6 rounds. 5 struck Stax in the face and chest, while 1 missed and became embedded in the wall. He died on the spot, blood spreading over the scattered cards. The entire attack lasted only 11 seconds. This was not merely another Lufanza hit. Stax Edwards had been a professional boxer who trained alongside Muhammad Ali in his camps and had faced real contenders. He possessed discipline, structure, and a promising future. Yet by December 1978, he had become a low-level errand runner for Jimmy Burke's crew, and he had made a fatal error. He neglected to dispose of a van. That single mistake ended his life at just 28 years old. This is the tale of a fighter who fell from the world of Ali into the shadowy underworld of Burke. From boxing gyms to mob-run kitchens, from sparring partner to getaway driver, from the edge of greatness to execution due to failure. Stax Edwards wasn't murdered for betrayal. He was killed because he could be replaced. But here's what the stories never shared. Before the mob, Stax had a real life, a legitimate career and a path to success, and he turned his back on it all. Parnell Stephen Edwards was born on July 19, 1950 in Brooklyn, New York. His parents were working class. His father labored in a factory while his mother cleaned homes. Stax grew up in Brownsville, one of Brooklyn's toughest neighborhoods. Violence was routine and poverty was expected. Yet Stax possessed something most local kids lacked: natural athletic talent. By the age of 14, he stood 6 feet tall, lean, quick, and agile with rapid hands and precise footwork. A local trainer observed him fighting on the streets and encouraged him to train at a gym. At 15, Stax began boxing seriously at Gleason's Gym in Brooklyn, one of New York's most respected boxing institutions. Gleason's had produced champions. Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier both trained there. Survive at Gleason, and you could fight anywhere. Stax endured. He wasn't destined for stardom or championship glory, but he was skilled enough to gain notice. By 17, he sparred with professional fighters, and at 19, he turned professional. Fighting as a lightweight at 135 pounds, he participated in 14 pro bouts from 1969 to 1974, recording 7 wins, 5 losses, and 2 draws. He wasn't a title contender, but he was resilient. He could absorb punishment and never back down. Promoters appreciated his reliability, commitment, and lack of complaints over pay. Trainers valued his discipline. He neither drank nor smoked and trained 6 days a week. Boxing gave Stax structure, purpose, and identity. Here, where his journey touched greatness. In the early 1970s, Muhammad Ali held training camps in New York and Pennsylvania, chaotic environments filled with dozens of sparring partners, trainers, onlookers, reporters, and fans. Ali required security, not secret service. Just strong men to control crowds, keep outsiders away, and prevent disruptions. Stax Edwards was one of these men. It's important to understand what this meant. Stax wasn't Ali's personal bodyguard nor part of his inner circle, traveling to fights or sharing hotel rooms. He was one of several fighters providing occasional security at Ali's camps, monitoring doors, checking credentials, and managing crowds. It was grunt work, but it was legitimate, and it placed Stax near the greatest boxer of all time. For a kid from Brownsville, that proximity felt like achievement. Later retellings exaggerated his role. Some called him Ali's bodyguard, Others suggested he was on a permanent security team. The truth is simpler. Stax was a journeyman fighter performing occasional security work around Ali's camps, close enough to witness greatness, but never close enough to participate fully. That gap between being near greatness and fully engaging with it would define the rest of Stax's life. By 1975, his boxing career had plateaued. At 25, his record showed no improvement, title fights were absent, and earnings were insufficient to support himself. In the 1970s, journeyman boxers earned between $500 and $2,000 per fight. Stax fought maybe 4 times a year, earning between $2,000 and $8,000 annually. That was barely enough to survive, not in New York, not with rent, food, gym fees, and medical bills from taking repeated punches to the face. Gradually, Stax started skipping training sessions and stopped showing up for sparring appointments. Promoters stopped calling him. By 1976, his boxing career was effectively finished. The discipline that had once kept him focused began to erode. Without structure, without purpose, and without reliable income, Stax started drifting. He attempted legitimate work. He spent a few months in construction and later worked as a nightclub bouncer in Queens. But he wasn't suited for a 9-to-5 life. He had spent a decade training to fight, to endure pain, and to survive violence. Those skills don't translate well to normal jobs. By 1977, Stax had developed a cocaine habit. At first, it was casual, recreational. But cocaine in the 1970s was far different from today. Expensive, addictive, and requiring money he didn't have. He began associating with people who had cash, gamblers, bookies, petty criminals. Through these connections, he found himself at Robert's Lounge in Queens, stepping into Jimmy Burke's world. In 1977, Jimmy Burke was 46 years old, a Lukey's Crime family associate running hijacking and fencing operations out of Robert's Lounge in South Ozone Park. Burke needed men, muscle, drivers, followers, expendable operatives. Stax fit the profile perfectly. He was big, strong, well-known locally, and most importantly, desperate. Burke didn't recruit him for intelligence or ambition. He recruited him because Stax was available and replaceable. Initially, Stax was given minor tasks: drive a car, pick up a package, stand at a door. He wasn't officially part of the crew, he was hired help. But the pay was attractive. $200 for a single night's work, $500 for a weekend, more if the job was risky. For someone used to earning $8,000 per year from boxing, it felt like wealth. In 1978, Stax began working regularly for Burke's crew, running errands, transporting stolen goods, driving getaway vehicles. He was close enough to the action to feel significant, yet distant enough to be disposable. And with men like Jimmy Burke, being disposable is dangerous. Become a liability and you vanish. Then came Lufanza, December 11, 1978. At 3:17 a.m. at John F. Kennedy International Airport, 6 armed men broke into the Lufanza cargo terminal and stole $5 million in cash, along with $875,000 in jewelry. It was the largest cash robbery in American history at that time. Jimmy Burke orchestrated it, Tommy DeZimone carried it out, Henry Hill facilitated it, and Stax Edwards was assigned one critical follow-up task: drive the getaway van to a scrapyard in New Jersey and have it destroyed within hours. The van contained fingerprints, forensic evidence, and traceable items. If authorities discovered it, the entire crew would be exposed. This task was crucial, and Burke trusted Stax with it. He was supposed to leave immediately after the heist at 4:30 a.m., drive the van to Burke-controlled scrapyard in Jersey City, and have the owner on the payroll. Ensure it was crushed by 5:00 a.m., compacted into a metal cube by 6:00 6:00 a.m. and sold for scrap by week's end. No evidence, no investigation, no risk. Stax pay for this job $10,000. All he had to do was drive 15 miles and watch the van be destroyed. Instead, Stax failed. He got high. After leaving the airport, he parked the van outside his girlfriend's apartment in Ozone Park. Went inside, smoked cocaine, and fell asleep. The van remained there for 3 days. The police eventually discovered the van. They towed it to an impound lot, where forensic teams processed it thoroughly. Fingerprints were lifted from the steering wheel, door handles, and gear shift. Stax prints were everywhere, along with those of other crew members. The FBI now possessed concrete evidence linking the Lufanza heist to the crew, and it was Stax's failure that caused it. Jimmy Burke learned of the mistake on December 15th. He didn't shout. He didn't issue threats. He simply made a decision. Stax Edwards had to be eliminated, not as punishment but as a matter of housekeeping. Stax had become a loose end, and loose ends are cut. Burke assigned the job to Tommy DeSimone. At 28, DeSimone was Burke's most dependable hitman, already responsible for at least 6 murders by that time. He was impulsive, violent, and efficient, asking no questions, showing no hesitation. Burke ordered Stax's death. Tommy replied, "Okay." 3 days later, it was done. On December 18, 1978, Tommy DeSimone and Angelo Seep drove to Stax Ozone Park apartment early in the morning around 6:00 a.m. They knew he would be home. They knocked on the door. Stax opened it, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, still groggy from a night of drugs. Tommy entered, Angelo following. Stax's girlfriend was sitting at the kitchen table. Tommy instructed her to go into the bedroom, and she complied. Tommy didn't explain himself to Stax. He didn't give him a chance to plead. He simply raised the gun and fired. According to Henry Hill's later testimony, Tommy shot 6 times. 5 bullets struck Stax in the face and chest, 1 missed. Stax died instantly, collapsing onto the kitchen floor. Tommy and Angelo left, got into the car, and drove back to Robert's lounge, reporting that the job was complete. Burke nodded. That was it. Stax Edwards, a former professional boxer, occasional security aide for Muhammad Ali's training camps, was dead at 28, executed for failing to dispose of a van. What makes his death particularly tragic is that he wasn't a mobster or career criminal. He was an athlete who lost his way, a fighter unable to find a fight worth having, someone who had glimpsed greatness and spent the rest of his short life trying to reclaim that feeling. Working for Jimmy Burke gave him the illusion of power, a sense of importance, but Stax confused proximity with protection, and that confusion cost him his life. You have to understand how expendable Stax was to Burke. In the mafia hierarchy, there are bosses, underbosses, captains, soldiers, and associates. Stax wasn't even an associate. He was hired help, a day laborer with a criminal twist. He had no family connections, no institutional protection, no leverage. If Stax disappeared, nobody would retaliate. Nobody would investigate. Nobody would care. Burke knew this, and that is why he had no hesitation in ordering Stax's execution. And yet the sadder part of Stax's story is that he had real options. In 1975, before his boxing career fully collapsed, a trainer offered him a full-time position at Gleason's gym, training young fighters and running the facility. Legitimate work, steady income, a future. Stax turned it down, insisting he wasn't ready to give up fighting. He wanted one more shot at a real payday. That shot never came. By the time he was ready, the opportunity had been taken by someone else. This is often the pattern with men like Stax. They see crime as temporary, a way to earn fast cash until the real opportunity arrives. But crime has gravity. The longer you stay, the harder it is to escape. Stax believed he was just doing a few jobs for Burke until he could get back on his feet. But with men like Jimmy Burke, There is no getting back on your feet. There's only sinking deeper until the only exit is a bullet. After Stax's murder, Burke's crew continued their killings. Martin Krugman disappeared in January 1979, strangled and dismembered. Richard Eaton was shot. Joe Manry was dumped in a trash container. Teresa Ferrara's body was found in a car trunk. Tommy DeZimone himself vanished in January 1979, killed by the Gambino family for murdering a mafia associate without permission. By March 1979, 6 people tied to the Lufanza heist were dead. Stax was the first. His funeral was small. Only his mother attended. His girlfriend attended. A few friends from the old boxing gyms showed up. Nobody from Burke's crew was present. They had already moved on. Stax was laid to rest in a Brooklyn cemetery close to where he grew up. There was no famous monument, no public memorial, just a simple grave marker with his name and dates. July 19, 1950 to December 18, 1978. 28 years old. But the important part of Stax Edwards' story isn't the Lufanza heist itself, it's the path that led him there. Stax wasn't born a criminal. He was born an athlete, disciplined, full of potential, skilled enough to spar with champions, trusted enough to work around Muhammad Ali, and capable of a legitimate career. Yet when that career stalled, when the money stopped flowing, when the structure disappeared, he made a choice. He could struggle in poverty doing honest work, or chase fast money through risky, illegal work. He chose the latter, and it cost him his life. This is the part of mob tales that rarely gets told, the stories of the expendable men, the hired help, people like Stax Edwards who weren't mobsters. They were desperate, vulnerable men, exploited by those like Jimmy Burke. They had no family ties, no protection, no power, just need. Burke gave them just enough money to stay hooked, just enough responsibility to feel important, and just enough exposure to ensure they could be disposed of. Stax thought he was working for the mob. He was working for Jimmy Burke, and Burke used him like a disposable tool, useful for one job, discarded when no longer needed. Stax's error wasn't forgetting to dispose of the van. His error was believing he mattered to people who saw him only as a means to an end. You can't build loyalty with a hammer. You use it until it breaks, then you get another. That's Stax Edwards' legacy. A footnote in the Lufanza story, a minor character in Goodfellas, portrayed by Samuel L. Jackson in a famous scene. Jackson's depiction made Stax appear like a failure, a junkie who couldn't follow simple instructions. But that wasn't who he really was. Stax was a professional fighter, a disciplined athlete, a man who had worked around greatness. He didn't fail because he was incompetent. He failed because he was addicted, desperate, and in over his head. And here's a question no one asks. Why did Burke assign the most important post-heist task to a known cocaine user? He knew Stax was unreliable. The answer is simple. Burke expected him to fail. And when he did, Burke had a reason to kill him. Stax knew too much. He understood the crew, the plan, and the flow of money. As long as he lived, he was a potential witness, a potential informant, a liability. The van was just the excuse. That's how men like Jimmy Burke operate. Set you up to fail, then eliminate you and call it consequences. Stax never had a chance. He was doomed the moment he stepped into the Lufanza heist. Burke only needed a justification. But here's the unanswerable question. What if Stax had actually disposed of the van? Would Burke have spared him? Probably not. He was still a liability. He still knew too much. He was still expendable. Burke killed men like Martin Krugman and Joe Manry even when they did everything correctly. Paranoia in that world doesn't care about competence. It only cares about control. And the only way to guarantee control is to eliminate the threat. Stax Edwards was a fighter who never found a fight worth winning. He glimpsed greatness briefly and spent the rest of his life chasing it. He believed that working for Jimmy Burke was another way to get close to power, to feel important, to matter. But crime doesn't work like boxing. In the ring, effort brings skill, respect, and advancement. In crime, effort just makes you useful, and useful people are the first to be killed because they know too much and dead men can't testify. Stax died face down on a Queens kitchen floor, shot 6 times by a man he once trusted, for a mistake made while high on cocaine, working for a crew that never valued him, chasing money he'd never see, for a heist he barely participated in. 28 years old, a professional boxer who sparred with champions, who worked around Muhammad Ali, and ended up as a cautionary tale about desperation, addiction, and the disposable men at the bottom of organized crime. That is the true story of Stax Edwards, not the screw-up from Goodfellas, but the athlete who lost his way, who traded discipline for quick cash, who confused proximity to power with power itself. And he learned that lesson 6 seconds too late. If you found this story revealing, hit subscribe. We release a new mob documentary every week. Drop a comment. Do you think Stax ever had a real chance, or was he destined to die the moment he walked into Robert's lounge? This is Mafia Talks, untold stories from the world of organized crime. Until next time.